This is a very exciting time of the year for us in our Zone 5 garden. We're still harvesting crops from our winter garden, but what makes this time of year really special is that we're planting again for spring. Yesterday I planted potatoes and sugar snap peas, and today I'll plant carrots, beets, and turnips. Let's get started. I'll be planting these crops under a single layer of cover in cold frames, which are my favorite season extension tool for beginning gardeners. They're easy to make, very effective, and you can usually make them out of repurposed materials like storm windows and scrap wood. As a general rule, when not using cover, you can start carrots about 4 weeks before your average last frost date and beets and turnips about 3 weeks before. But I am using cover. One layer of cover allows me to move the planting dates 3 weeks earlier. I know it can be confusing when I just rattle off planting dates in a video, so to make things more clear, I provided a link to the planting calendar that I use in the description below. You can also use this calendar by following the instructions that I've also provided in the description. Now let's get started planting by planting beets and turnips in this cold frame. My approach to planting is very simple. I'll start by just adding some vermicompost from our worm bins to each of the cold frames I'll be planting in today. I could also use compost, of course. I know from soil testing and from the results that we get in our garden that this approach provides our plants with all the nutrients they need, and I never have to use additional fertilizers. I also mulch all of our crops, though with beets, carrots, and turnips, they're planted so close together that I have to temporarily remove the mulch, and then I return it once the plants are well established. I'll be using square foot garden spacing for all three of these crops, and it just so happens that's 16 plants per square foot for all three crops. Some turnips may need a little more room than that, but I'm planting Tokyo market turnips, which are quite small. We grew Tokyo market turnips for the first time last year, and they quickly became our favorite turnip. They're more tender and sweet than other turnip varieties, and they grow to maturity in just 4 weeks under ideal conditions. They'll take a little bit longer than that when starting them this early in the season, but we do expect to start harvesting them by May. For beets, I'm planting Detroit Dark Red, one of our favorites, and a nice colorful blend of organic beets. I'll plant the turnips in front and the beets in back. To plant the turnips, I'll just create little furrows in the soil with my finger. I only need to plant these seeds about 1/4 inch deep. They're very small. I'll probably end up overplanting them a bit, but that's perfectly fine. What I do in that case is I'll just harvest some of them a little bit earlier. I don't thin them prematurely, in other words, before they're ready to harvest. Instead, I just harvest them to eat when they're small. And with my little furrows dug, I just drop the seeds in about every 3 inches. And I don't get too exact about this, and that's just fine. Like I said, if I overplant, I can always harvest some a little bit early. Alternatively, if some don't come up, I'll just come back later and plant more. When I'm planting this early, there's plenty of time to still plant turnips. And once they're planted, I simply cover them up with soil, tamp them down a bit. Beet seeds are a little bit larger than turnip seeds, so I'm going to plant them a little bit deeper, just about 1/2 inch. But the spacing will remain the same. I'll plant one seed about every 3 inches. I've also got my lovely kale plant here, sharing the same space. This is just our first planting of beets and turnips. We'll plant more in April and May. This will give us a more continuous harvest. And when we plant in April and May, we will no longer need to use cover, which is great. I'll keep this cover in place until shortly before our average last frost date. And one thing I should always mention is that at this time of the year, the greatest risk to these cool weather crops is overheating. So these cold frames, low tunnels, hoop house, etc., are vented almost every day. And then we close them up at night. And with all the seeds planted, I just cover them up. I'll be back to water these after finishing planting everything for the day. Next, I'll plant short and sweet carrots over in this cold frame. This is a very small variety that should give us a fairly early harvest. I mentioned that the turnips will be ready to harvest in May. The beets and carrots probably won't be ready to harvest until June. Things go a little bit slow at this time of the year. So let's plant those. Again, I'll be using square foot garden spacing, 16 per square foot. Now, I just showed you last month in a video how I plant carrots, so I won't go into a lot of detail here today. But basically, I'm just planting them exactly like I planted the turnips. I'll create furrows that are about 1/4 inch deep, plant the seeds about every 3 inches, and then cover them up with soil. I'll also succession plant carrots in April, May, and June. So I'll go ahead and plant these, and I'll get back to you when I'm done. Okay, I've finished planting and watering our carrots, beets, and turnips. And that's actually the last of my planting outside for this month. But I will be planting tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and basil in the grow room very soon. And I'll be bringing you along for that as well. Before closing, I thought I'd show you the cold frame covers that we're using. This one is an old storm window that a neighbor gave us when they replaced their windows. And this one over here is an old refrigerator shelf. Now, it's actually much too warm to have these lids on right now, so I'll go ahead and vent them. On a warm, sunny day like today, it could easily get up to well over 100 degrees in here, so it's very important to vent. But I do want to get the soil warm, so I'll leave it on just a little bit. Well, I hope you enjoyed joining me today as I planted carrots, turnips, and beets outside under single cover in Zone 5 in mid-March. Now, for all of you Oscar lovers out there, here's a clip of Oscar enjoying his catnip in the garden today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more videos on how to grow a lot of food on a little land without spending much or working harder than you have to. Good stuff.